might occur to you, it occurred to me, why would a commercial barrister be talking about principles and techniques of interviewing clients? Why would a barrister at all be talking about that? It's because Simon has got a particular interest in it and therefore has done the study on it and the psychology of it. He finds it very interesting. And as you will have read in the small bio there, Simon is someone who has an interest in lecturing and teaching, and he does it in the Reader's Course here at the bar. He's also done it at university. And so it's a natural adjunct to his practice as a commercial barrister. So no more to say except to say Simon Pitt is our presenter this morning. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you all for making the journey out on a cold, wet Thursday morning to come and hear me talk about client interviews, principles and techniques. And Michael's right. This is a bit of an odd topic for a commercial barrister to be talking about on the face of it, but I've written a few papers now in my nearly 7 years at the bar, and for some reason this seems to be the most popular. This is the fourth time I've given this paper in a very short space of time, and I started sort of reflecting on why that is, and I think it's because this is a very, very important part of our practice as lawyers. And it doesn't matter whether you're a barrister or a solicitor. Communicating with clients effectively is absolutely crucial, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But it is, as Michael said, a very sort of, it's a topic that I'm very, very interested in. I love actually being a barrister primarily because you get to deal with people and you get to solve their problems and you get to interact with them. But also body language. I don't know about you guys, but I just find the topic of body language very, very interesting. The concept that nearly 90% of communication between people when you're face to face with them is actually not what is said so much as how it's said, and tone and inflection of voice and, you know, mannerisms as people are speaking and so on and so forth. So I'd just say there that this aspect of our jobs, the importance of it just cannot be overstated. It's absolutely crucial. And I note also that client interviewing is now taught at most of the big law schools, and they actually run competitions on interviewing clients now. So there's certainly been a recognition that it's very important at that level as well. I was just harking back to my supervising partner when I was a lawyer at Herbert Gear, and he said something to me which I've kept with me and I strongly believe in. There's three aspects of your job as a lawyer. There's probably more than three, but there's three very important ones. There's 1/3 is technical ability, so your ability as a lawyer as such. 1/3 is how you get along with people inside or within the actual firm, so your relationships within the firm or your workplace. And the other third is how you get along with people, how you communicate with people outside the firm, namely clients. Now, my supervising partner, Bill Fazio at Herbert Gear, said to me, you need to pass in all three of those to be a competent lawyer. You need to have reasonable technical ability, you need to be able to get along with people inside your firm, and you need to be able to get along with people outside your firm, so clients and so forth. However, he said to me, and I believe, that if you excel in any one of those three areas, it doesn't matter which one it is, you'll be a good lawyer, a very good lawyer. If you excel in any two of those areas, again, doesn't matter which two, you will be an excellent lawyer. But if you excel in all three of those areas, technical ability, relationships within the firm and relationships outside the firm, you will be an exceptional lawyer. So I believe that, and I just want to pass it on, because if you're a pass in technical ability but you're extremely good at communicating with people within and outside the firm, then I would suggest that makes you a very, very good lawyer. I'll leave that with you. There are doubtless many people in the room who are far more qualified to talk about client interviewing than me. I think experience in this area is absolutely critical, and again, there are a lot of people in the room with far more experience than me. But there are a number of aspects which can be practiced, And I think there are a number of aspects which it pays to come back to and revisit and talk about from time to time. That's client interviewing. So I've seen some of my colleagues go into a client interview and haven't read the brief. They put a book of post-it notes randomly in various pages throughout the brief and then ask the client, tell me in your own words what this case is about. Now, I'd suggest that's not a very good approach to a client interview. My experiences and observations have been drawn obviously from personal experience, but also from books and websites and various things which, as I say, I'm very interested in this topic. So if I get those across to you in a sort of a coherent manner that you can follow, then I guess I'll be not unlike a grindstone at which you can sharpen the tools of your trade for the morning. As Michael said, I think this is certainly a topic that touches on two things. One is common sense and one is amateur psychology. There are so many reasons, as I've said in the paper, why this aspect of the job's important. The first and foremost is that 90% of this job, I suggest, is about people. You need to properly evaluate your client's problems when they come in to see you. They won't all necessarily be legal problems either. You need to elicit information. You're on a fact-finding mission to find out what the client's problem is and the background behind it so you can get a better idea of how to fix it. You need to get to know your clients as people, perhaps to help you understand their problems, all of which won't necessarily be legal. And that helps us too, because I think rule number one as solicitors, certainly when I was a solicitor, is you've got to know your client. And you've got to know them really, really well. You've got to know their foibles and their peccadillos and their strengths and their weaknesses. And you've got to pass that information on to us as barristers, because even though we get to see the client and we get to prep them for court or we get to have a conference with them or what have you, our main job is to know the bench. We go into court and we've got to be an advocate and we've got to convince the bench or the jury or whoever that our particular case is right. But we don't necessarily have that fundamental or that deep understanding of the people whom we're dealing with, whereas you guys do. I delivered this paper a couple of weeks ago and a solicitor asked me in question time, he said, Simon, so what if your client's lying? You get them sworn up on affidavit or you get them to adopt a witness statement in court and that's it. Then it becomes their problem. If they're lying, they'll get caught out. Well, that's all very well and good, but as barristers, we need to know what kind of people we're dealing with. We need to know if they're going to fall apart in the witness box. We need to know if they're truthful people, if they're not truthful people, etc. And you as solicitors who have a close relationship with the clients can pass that information on to us. So, know thy client, I suggest. Fifth, you need to retain your clients. And I've made a note here, I guess in that sense, they're not unlike children. We have to love them unconditionally, warts and all, because let's face it, they pay the bills. And last, you need to practice human interaction. You run successful law firms or you've been employed at law firms not because of your legal skills, primarily maybe it might be, but also because of your people skills. And you need to practice that. It's like any other skill in your toolbox. You need to practice client interaction. You need to practice human interaction. And human nature, I'd suggest, dictates that people would rather deal with somebody that they like rather than somebody they can't stand. So if you're friendly and approachable and you understand your clients and you get along with them, they are more likely, I would suggest, to come back to you. So having got that preliminary stuff out of the way, I'm going to go through a few aspects of client meetings. And again, a lot of you will think this is trite, and a lot of you will think that this is second nature and that it's just, common sense. But in my limited experience, sometimes common sense isn't necessarily that common. And a lot of you will know your clients very well, so many of these rules won't apply. But it pays to go over this stuff from time to time, I think. So, in my experience again, the first very important part of a client meeting is preparing for it. if I'm meeting a client for the first time, somebody who I've got to run a case for in, a couple of weeks or tomorrow, I'll do a chronology. We all know about chronologies, but they're a wonderful tool for so many reasons. If you prepare a good chronology, it's amazing what falls out of it, isn't it? When you know your way around the facts in a chronological and coherent manner, then you can be dropped in the middle of the client's problem anywhere, and you'll be able to have reference to certain chronological events to work out, well, that can't be right because this happened before it or that happened before it. Knowing a chronology of a client's case is extremely important, and that's always a starting point for me. It also helps with something that I call active listening, and I know that's a real buzzword, and it's a bit sort of it's a bit corny, but I'll come back to that in a moment. Active listening is, I guess, steering your clients in the right direction, because they all want catharsis for their money sometimes, and they all want to have a bit of a rant and get a lot off their chests. And if you can embrace that and take it and sort of piggyback off things that they've said in a long rambling sentence, you can steer them in the direction that you want them to go. I always find it a good idea to Google the business. It's amazing what you can find out on the internet these days. And it's a really good approach to have an article that you've just read, or a fact about the client's business or the sector that the client's business is in, just to sort of weave into conversation. It looks really impressive. A client sort of says that it says to a client that you've thought about their matter, you've thought about their business, and it doesn't take long to do. Think about the structure of the interview, both the geographical structure and the content. I'll come back to the geographic point in a moment, but an interview should have a beginning, a middle and an end. Again, I know that sounds trite, but sometimes a client sits down and you just start talking, and before you know it, you've talked for 30 or 40 minutes and you haven't really got anywhere. You're not sure what's been covered, what needs to be covered, client's confused, and so on. It's happened a lot with me as well, so it's something that you need to get the structure right. And fourth, again, it's trite, but think about your appearance, especially for junior solicitors. I was taught this when I was at Herbert Gear. Your clothes do matter. How you appear to a client does matter. If you're in casuals and the client's in a suit, I would suggest it's just not a good look. You want to match that sort of the dress or the formality or whatever that the client's putting across. They've gone to the trouble of putting on a suit for your client interview, and so should you, in my view. Second aspect is the greeting. Again, I keep saying that common sense. Clients will be nervous usually, and they'll be apprehensive, and they'll be worried because they're about to spend a lot of money, or they're about to embark upon a course of litigation, and they're about to enter a system, an adversarial system, that they're not familiar with. But we are. This is something we do every day, but they don't. So the greeting, I think, is important. You've heard that expression, you only get one chance to make a first impression. The first 10 or 20 seconds of a client interview can set the tone for the whole rest of the interview. So I'd suggest a firm handshake, a smile, eye contact, be relaxed and confident. If you're coming off a busy morning and you've got an interview in the afternoon, maybe take 5 or 10 minutes just to compose yourself, rather than stepping into another client meeting in a huge flap. I know that's always easier said than done. Break the ice with some small talk. I always find it good to just, talk about the footy or the traffic, or how was your train ride on the way in? Did you get stung by the broken rail at Spencer Street Station, or whatever it was the other day? And use the client's name. Again, the author of this quote's unknown, but it's so true. The sweetest music to the sound of somebody's ears is the sound of their own name. And we all know that's true. When you use somebody's name, you engage them, you get their attention, and it's a really, really effective way of communicating. Third, environment. Most people will be around a conference table, or you might be at your desk, something like that, but you need to obviously make sure that the client's comfortable. You might want to sit the client across from you so that you've got the maximum amount of sort of interaction with them. Obviously, if it's a personal injury case, you wouldn't want to sit the client next to you because they might not be able to look at you. Little things like that. If you're a family law practitioner, a solicitor said this to me the other day, family law practitioners may have a different approach because they need to be very sort of empathetic or nurturing, or very sort of sensitive to the client's problems. You might want to sit next to a client or put them on the end of the conference table and you sit on the at a 90-degree angle to them, because it's more informal and it's more conducive to getting to the heart of the sort of troubling issues that might be facing them. Fourth, identification of the problem. Maybe ease into it. I've said here also, be aware that clients will want catharsis for their money, and they may just want to tell their story for a while. I think we're all pretty familiar with that because, clients come in and they've made the decision to engage a lawyer, and particularly when they come to be interviewed by a barrister, perhaps in preparation for a trial, they want to just get a bit off their chest, and they want to get you on side and make you see that the other guy's a bad guy and they've done all this stuff, and it's been such a terrible run, and I can't believe that they diddled me on that business deal or whatever. They may just want to tell their story for a while, and I've found that if you just let them tell their story and get a little bit off their chest, they'll sit back and take a deep breath, and having got that off their chest, you can sort of get into the more pressing matters. Tailor the interview depending on the personality, demeanour and mood of the client. Well, I had a case recently where it was a wills and estates matter, and a young lady of about 25 was bringing a claim against the estate of her deceased grandfather. And grandchild cases are always difficult because, as we know, the primary duty is not really owed to the grandchild, it's owed to the child. But this was a case where this girl had been sexually abused by her grandfather for a number of years before he passed away. And there had been a period of estrangement there, and we needed to explain all that. And it was a very difficult client interview because I was acutely aware that this young woman was talking about things that were seriously distressing to her. And a lot of you out there probably deal with this very regularly, but I had to be very careful in the way that I sort of led into that topic and addressed it and talked to her about it. I didn't want to get too much information, but I wanted to give her the opportunity of sort of telling her story and all that. And it was very difficult. It sort of tested a lot of my skills and made me think about my approach to client interviews. And her body language when she sat down, she was all, sort of closed up. I'll demonstrate for a moment in a minute, but the arms crossed, legs crossed, sort of very, very closed off, and had to sort of address that and sort of get information out of her very carefully. Sometimes clients want to spend too much time on irrelevant matters. Now, they're matters that we know are irrelevant, but they probably seem quite relevant to a client. So if they're reluctant to open up and reveal information, it often helps, I find, to try and reassure clients and do that active listening where you pick up on something they've said but then lead them, piggyback off that into another direction and something a bit more relevant. Try to steer them onto important matters. In terms of information gathering, I'd say be ordered in your approach. Chronological is probably best, so you start at the beginning and work your way through chronologically. B, I've already covered. If you have to gain sensitive information, be aware of their personality, their demeanour and their mood. And again, I'm probably repeating myself, but clients will often think material which we know is relevant to their case is irrelevant, and vice versa. Listen actively. Now, I've come back to that. What's an example of that? Well, you've all heard about, and it's similar to when barristers are asking questions of evidence in chief in court. You ask a question and say, tell me what happened on such and such a day. I'd like to take you back to this day. Tell me what happened on that day. Oh, well, I drove to work and, it was a 22-degree day and the sky was clear and da-da-da-da. Okay, now, you've told me about the weather. Now, when you got to work, tell me what happened then. And the client will say, oh, well, I walked in and I had a chat to John and, John's always a really good bloke, but today, he was in a really bad mood on that day. And okay, now you say John was in a bad mood. Did you speak to anybody else on that day? Yeah, well, I spoke to Mary and, Mary was there and I had a chat to good chat to Sharon in the typing pool. And, clients just, they sometimes want to tell their story and get out all this irrelevant information. You can just gently sort of coax them, listen actively, say, okay, you've told me about that. Now just steer them in the right direction. Okay, what happened when you got to work? Say it was a personal injury case. You'd be saying things like, okay, now, you're here because of an injury. Tell me about the circumstances surrounding that. Oh, I went up and, the harness was broken, so I went to bend down and pick these things up. Okay, now you say that. You say the harness was broken. Okay, tell me, it's just sort of, it's a way of piggybacking off things clients are saying to take them in the right direction. And again, it's quite trite, but it's very effective sometimes. We call it piggybacking, but in client interviews it could be called active listening because you're engaging with the client, you're letting them know that you're listening to what they're saying, but you're taking them in the direction that you want them to go. Number 6 there, closing. I think summing up is very important at the end of a client interview because you want to have a few bullet points that you've taken note of during the talk or during the interview. Something like a to-do list. It's really good to give clients homework, I find, because they feel like they're really involved, and give them a few tasks or things to look into overnight or by the next time you see them. Clients are looking for certainty and confidence, and you certainly want to send them away thinking that A, you've listened to them, B, you've got a proper understanding of the nature of their problem, C, you've got a couple of ideas in mind about how you can solve it, and D, perhaps a to-do list or certain things to go on with and look into before the next conference. Don't give a strong indication of the client's case. I've run into trouble a couple of times there, not serious trouble, thank goodness, but clients always want to know, don't they, how strong their case is or what chance they've got or whatever. You've really got to leave a bit of wiggle room, and there are a number of ways of doing that, but it helps to have a number of potential solutions to the client's problem. So you say, well, at this stage, it looks like, the direction we could be going is this, and I think certainly in the litigation system, with all of the exigencies and uncertainties of going to court, a client's case is never more than about probably 75%, really, because you've got to take into account, the judge, the other side, how the witness is going to perform in the witness box. There are so many variables that can come crashing down on you on the day, and it's sort of a very fine line, really, to walk when you're trying to encourage the client and tell them that they've got a good argument, but not trying to sort of, or trying not to give them any strong indications. Because the reality is you probably don't know enough yet. Certainly when I have a client interview, even if I've read all the documents, if I haven't properly and fully prepared for a case, I probably don't know enough about the client's case to give them a really solid appraisal or indication of their likelihood of success. So that's something to be aware of. And obviously clarify any uncertainties or any questions that the client may have. I think it pays to leave some time at the end to go through that stuff, because clients are inquisitive beasts, and as I say, they don't do this every day, whereas you do, and they'll have myriad questions that are bothering them, some easily answered, some probably not so easily answered, but need to leave some time at the end of the interview to go over that stuff and make sure that their mind's at rest as much as possible. When the client's gone, again, these 3 points are just in my experience, but sometimes helps to talk the meeting over with a colleague. If you work in a medium to big firm, that's obviously very easy. There are aspects of the interview that are troubling you. Have a chat to your colleagues about it. If you're a junior solicitor, you're probably in the interview with a supervising partner. So speak to them about any questions you may have. Seek any clarification. Kick around ideas about how to move forward. Dictate a file note. In my, again, limited experience, this is such an effective way of getting all your thoughts down on paper, and it's not always possible because I know everyone's busy, and sometimes it's simply not possible to go out of a client interview and dictate a lengthy file note, but I try and do just a brain dump. Just grab a dictaphone and just put everything in there, impressions, facts, first thoughts, future direction, so on and so on. Try and do that contemporaneously, sort of within 24 hours of the meeting. Because down the track, when you've got to come back to what a client said in an interview, that will be an invaluable reference tool. Because we're all human, we've all got a lot of files on the go, and sometimes we forget impressions that we had or thoughts that we had in that first interview, and if you just brain dump them on a dictaphone in bullet point form, it can be a very valuable tool. And diarise, again, a word I hate, but diarise any follow-ups. So if you said you'll do something by a certain date, whack it in the diary. So that covers really the first part of the talk. It's sort of like eating Weet Bix without milk a bit. It's very dry, I understand that, but it is very important. And if that aspect of the talk does no more than just remind you of something or make you think about interviewing clients in a certain way, then I think it's probably been valuable. I note that it's 8 o'clock, and I've got a break now, but so you guys can have something to eat. But I'm going to come back to the topic of body language, and this is, as I say, it's very sort of interesting. I don't know if any of you watched that show Lie to Me, but that guy on Lie to Me, you know, his job is really to read the body language of people and read the non-verbal communication to try and tell whether people are lying or what their story is. And I'm not suggesting we go to that level in this talk, but there are some sort of basic principles which I think really, really help with client interviewing and approaches to interacting with clients. So I'll come back to that after the break.